So if, for example, my football team, Celtic, sell a player to a new team for, say, £20 million, Celtic get that transfer fee. Okay. But if that player then gets sold to a third club, Celtic get 20% of that transfer fee as well. So it's like a finder's fee. Okay? Does the Victorian government get a finder's fee for all of the policies developed here in Victoria that Peter Malinauskas copied and implemented in South Australia and then on-sold it to Chris Minns' Labor government in New South Wales? And how much is that finder's fee worth to the Victorian state budget? When she became the Labor member for Bendigo East back in 1999, she was the youngest woman ever elected to the Victorian State Parliament. Only 3 years later, she became the youngest ever minister in the state of Victoria, full stop. Now, as Premier of the most progressive state in the nation, she's rolling out an ambitious suite of policies for a fairer and safer Victoria, many of which are sending her critics into a frenzy. And frankly, we don't care. We're just really excited to have her join us in person at the Socially Democratic office for this week's episode. So, Social Democrats, please join me for a special conversation with the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allan. And don't forget, you can watch the video version of the episode on YouTube. Just search Dunn Street or check the link in our show notes. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. All right, you ready?
Of course, always.
Okay, we're taping this one on a Wednesday. Oh, no, I'm looking at you. We're taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. It's not often we record an in-person interview here at the Socially Democratic Studios. It's normally reserved for premiers that are educated by the Maurice brothers and Harriet Shing. However, our special guest today is not Harriet Shing, but she was educated by the Maurice brothers and she is the 49th Premier of Victoria. Jacinta Allan, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you, Stephen. But you left out a critical part of my history with the Maurice brothers. I also played in the Maurice brothers brass band. That was a particular moment.
Did. I feel like we've talked about the last time we were on the show.
I'm a big fan of my brass band history and experience.
And look, if folks who aren't aware of it, they should go back and listen to that episode a while back and get the whole history of your time in band camp. Just interesting to note that I'm wondering, are you actually a podcast listener? Like, do you listen to podcasts?
I listen. I have only a select few, obviously, a little bit time pressured. You are on rotation. Socially Democratic is on rotation, of course, with Caddy K and the Mooch. Yeah. So dial into a bit of This Is Politics US and the UK original. A bit of New Daily as well. So I try for my podcast, other than your domestic podcast, I do try and tap into a little bit of international news to round out what I get from my domestic news consumption.
And obviously you still live in Bendigo, and it's a about a 2-hour drive to Melbourne, and that means there's a lot of commuting going on. Is that when you listen to podcasts, or what do you manage to do in that time when you're stuck in the car?
Basically, the way I have the car set up, because of course one of the benefits of being Premier is I have a driver, so pretty much the car is an extension of the office. So we've been talking a little bit about working from home lately. I work from home, the office, the car, and I've got it set up in a way that I can do Teams meetings with the team, paperwork. It's really valuable paperwork time. When the mobile phone coverage lets me, I get a few calls in as well. So it's pretty much office time. Car time is office time, and it's for me, it's a choice. Having young kids and family at home, I obviously want to try and get the balance right between time in Melbourne for work, time with the kids. So it is a lot of time in the car.
In preparation for this episode, I Googled your name.
Oh.
And the top 2 questions that were thrown up was, what does your husband do for a job, and do you have any children? Is that weird?
You could make a reflection about if you typed in Chris Minz's name, does it come up with what does Chris Minz's wife do and how many kids does he have? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I do wonder if it's a particular question that women get. But look, I guess having been a Member of Parliament now for nearly 26 years, I guess I've come to accept that, interest in your family is part of the job. And so the answer to those 2 questions, Stephen, is what does my husband do? He is a remarkable support to me. He's got a couple of part-time board gigs. He's a mad fisher person, loves his fish, loves his fishing. And, of course, he's really the primary carer raising our 2 beautiful kids. So that's the second answer. I have 2 beautiful children.
Speaking of fishing, how often in those car trips from Bendigo to Melbourne and back do you reflect on when will Yorick and Trav invite you to the weekend camping trips?
Oh, this is a moment of confession. I've had a few invites that I might have otherwise been a little busy.
You're not back.
I know. It's no, but look, the kids love it. The kids love going camping, and Yorick has 2 key influences on the kids. They barrack for Hawthorn and they love fishing and camping.
Right. Okay.
That's a great contribution.
It's interesting you said before you've obviously been in the role as Premier for almost 2 years. But as you said before, you've been a politician now in public life for almost 26 years. Do you find that are you constantly reintroducing yourself or introducing yourself to the Victorian public, or how does that?
Yeah, what's been interesting for me, because I've been a Member of Parliament for 24 years before I became Premier, and obviously had a number of ministerial portfolios as well. So in terms of the community around Bendigo and my electorate, I'm fairly well known locally. So I did going through that process of introducing myself to the state as Premier. I had to go back to thinking about how I did it in those early days when I first became a Member of Parliament, and understanding that people do want to understand not just you're a Labor politician and who you are and what you stand for, but that question of who you are, what's your background, what's your life, what do you do every day, which footy team do you barrack for? I get that all the time. So it's those questions that are about the personal as much about the politics and the policy. How
do you ground yourself? How do you centre yourself? Do you have a favourite kind of cafe in Bendigo where you hit the savvy bees with the girlfriends in high school or something like that? I don't know what savvy bees are. Someone wrote that question for me.
Savvy bees. All right. Sparkling rosé is our go-to.
Right,
so there you go. No, I've got some great girlfriends in Bendigo who provide wonderful support. But really, where I live in Bendigo, we live a little bit on the outskirts. So we're surrounded by the bush. And so the way I get to ground myself is every day that I'm home, I'll walk the dogs outdoors. The Japanese call it forest bathing. I get to do that every day when I'm home walking the dogs and enjoying. And I try and do it every morning. And for me, if you can maybe ask my team how I am of a day that I haven't gone for a walk, it's a really good head clear for the start of the day. You go for a walk, you can process things in the peace and quiet in the bush, and it's really, for me, a great way to start the day.
When you think back to when you first put your hand up for public office, you're 25, 24.
I think I was pre-selected when I was 23, but who's counting, Stephen? Clearly.
Okay, so when you reflect on the 23-year-old Jacinta Allan and the motivations that she had to enter into public office, has that changed over the time? What has been the evolution of what motivates you to do the work that you do?
It's very much the same. What motivated me then as a much younger woman in Bendigo, and what motivates me to this day, is working people and families. And I guess that comes from my own experience growing up in Bendigo Dad worked at the SEC until Jeff Kennett came along and privatised it. Shame. Mum was she was of that era where you stopped working when you got married and had kids. Really, living in that community, seeing how working people and families, got by every single day, but also had that great grounding in community and what it meant to be part of a community, being involved in sport, in netball, in basketball. That's what drove me to put my hand up at a time when Jeff Kennett was Premier, Bendigo East wasn't seen as a winnable seat, was wanting to give voice to working people and families, people like me from families that I came from. And that continues to drive me today. And I think today, it's as important now as it was then to continue to give voice to working people and families. Their voice should be as equal in public debates and public consideration and discussions as big business, as unions, as any other group. And I think it's important that when we make policies, remember who we're making policies and decisions for.
Do you like campaigns?
Love it. Campaigns are great. Isn't that why we're in Carter Grove? It is.
No, but don't you think some politicians want to get in and do the work but hate the campaign? And some politicians, if I was running for public office, I'd want to run for public office
every day.
Yeah, and not do the other bit.
I love both. I think doing the privilege of being in government, and I say this from the perspective of I've been blessed of my time in Parliament. I've only had to experience 4 years in opposition, and they were awful because you couldn't get to do things. You could talk about the things that were going wrong and the things you'd like to do, but you couldn't actually be the decision maker. So I've been blessed to have the opportunity to be on a part of government and part of decision making. So I love that bit. But also too, what I love about the campaigning piece, and this might come from my years as a checkout chick for 7 years, working the registers in Bendigo, was it's people. The reason why we're in this job is the people that we represent. Now that might sound a bit corny, but what campaigns give you is that opportunity every day, talking to people, listening to people, understanding what the issues are, and then knowing that you're in a privileged position to go and do something about it. That's what is great about campaigning.
The Werribee by-election was kind of your first electoral test in being elected in your tenure as Premier. And obviously Labor suffered a 16% swing on a primary, but not as big a swing to the Liberals as many had predicted, which I think is interesting. I just want to get a sense from you about what are the key takeaways from that by-election, because it was early in your tenure, not a bad thing to have happen early just to sort of, road test where you're at.
Yeah, look, it was a tough campaign, and it came at a time in the political cycle. Obviously, it was just before the federal election, and it came at a time in the political cycle where there was a number of things happening at once. Obviously, the cost of living pressures. We hadn't had. I think there might have been an interest rate cut late last year, but there hadn't been the relief valve of interest rate cuts that many people were holding on to, and the pressures were piling up. And also too, it was at a time when we were working through how to communicate really clearly what is our agenda, what are we, what does the Labor government that I'm so privileged to lead, what is our agenda for working people and families? So the Werribee by-election gave us the opportunity to communicate really clearly with people, saying we understand your issues around cost of living pressures, they're real, and really the lessons out of that by-election we carried forward into the budget that we handed down in May of this year, which had a complete focus on cost of living. Free public transport for kids under the age of 18 that kicks into gear from the 1st of January next year. That's the sort of cost of living outcome that we've achieved from listening to the families in Werribee and listening to their day-to-day. I did some door knocking in Werribee with our great candidate. I think the other lesson out of it too, we had a great local Labor candidate in John Lister. He grew up there. He was a school teacher there. I went door knocking with him. He, you're such and such. Your mum taught at my school. Like he had and it was, really those genuine engagements that you get. So we had a great local candidate. And the lesson out of that, because there was a swing, and it was a tough swing against the Labor Party, the Labor government. But what it also told us very clearly was cost of living is what's concerning people. We know that because they told us really, really clearly. And that then directly shaped the work we were doing on the budget around cost of living. I've mentioned free PT for kids, free PT for seniors on weekends, another round of the power saving bonus. So, recognising that governments should always listen and deliver policies and programs that are supporting people where they're at.
COVID was interesting in the sense that I think that the wider community probably didn't realise how much government can play a positive role in your lives. Because, a lot of people, when they think about voting, they're like, it doesn't make any difference anyway. Well, I think we saw during COVID that it can make a difference. What do you think the role of government is in this post-COVID era moving forward into the future?
Look, this is something I think about a lot, and I think about it particularly both in the context of what are the good positive things governments can and should do. I've mentioned cost of living support, recognising where some of those pressures are at right now. The ongoing delivery of, I think COVID showed us, the delivery of good public services is so central to families' lives. Public aged care, the way, supporting our public hospital system, the way our schools, and the way our government schools particularly, and I saw it in my own household with the way our school just fully went online and supported kids to have a continuity of education, reinforced for me this centrality of government in terms of delivering good public services. But we also saw there was that kickback about being told what to do. And so I think what we're seeing post-COVID is a lot of those pressures that we might have bottled up a bit because we're all doing the right thing and wearing masks and getting vaccinated to get us through. But there's no doubt that there's some pressures that are present today, whether it's a combination of COVID and the world, the social. I don't want to be one of those people who just blames everything on social media, but we can't deny that social media is now giving voice and platforms to issues in a way we've never experienced before. So, and that I think also puts pressure on people. So I think we're still going through a settling of how we operate as a society, and whether it's people coming together around protesting particular issues. The way I talk every time I talk to parents, particularly mums of kids the same age as mine, it often comes back to some of the mental health struggles they're worried about their kids, too much screen time. Something every time you get a group of parents together with, as I said, with primary school age kids or even secondary school age kids, that's where the conversation inevitably goes. I'm worried about my kids' health and I'm worried about them spending too much time on screens. But what do I do about it? That's why I think what the federal government's doing with the social media ban is really powerful, because it actually gives parents another tool to help them be parents. So I think we've still got a bit of a way to go, Stephen, in terms of this, what is the role of government going forward. I think it's about making sure we keep up the good delivery of public services, but respond to understanding where people are at. I've mentioned cost of living. I've mentioned the federal government's social media ban, the work we're doing here in Victoria on work from home, understanding that that's the future. Where do families want to be today and into the future, and setting up a pathway to support them there.
What do you think is going to be what is the North Star of the Allan Labor government?
It's working people and families. I know I've said that a lot already in the time we've been talking today. But again, it's who I am. It's where I've come from. It's also, I think, a group in our community that need to continue to have the strongest of representation. They're the engine room of our community. They're the ones running the small businesses. They're the ones who are teachers and nurses in our schools. They're the ones who are, volunteering across all of our sporting and community organisations. So it's about making sure that in the work I do every day, and this goes back to both your question about campaigning, but also one of the reasons why I love being a member of Parliament is because it's about the opportunity to hear directly from people and then listen really carefully to what their experience is, what their challenges are, and then respond to them.
Let's talk about the work from home issue or topic. You made a signature announcement at the Labor Party State Conference the other week here in Victoria, signalling that an Allan government would legislate to the right to work from home for at least 2 days a week, I think that's right, where applicable. Talk us through the genesis of this idea.
This again comes from listening to people, understanding where families are at right now. And again, it is a product of how our lives have changed on the other side of COVID, and some years on the other side now of COVID. Working from home was a feature of life pre-COVID. But we were all much more familiar with and feeling more comfortable with technology, using Teams and Zoom, whatever your platform is. And we are seeing how many families have realised that it works for them. You know, if you can do 1-2 days in a 5-day week where you're not driving 2 hours a day, that's if it means you can do the school drop-off, pick up and drop-off, means you don't have to put your kid in before or after school care. So that's by saving time and money. So it came from listening to what was happening now, but also hearing, two things. The unions in this space tell us that every day they're getting calls from workers saying, hey, I've just been told, you know, my working from home arrangements are changing. I gave an example at conference of a woman who worked in the aviation industry, single mum, 2 kids, lived in the outer suburbs. Her 1 day a week meant everything to her. And that 1 day a week working from home, she was told that was being taken off her on a Teams call by a boss who was working from home themselves, right? So, like, yeah, it is. It really is. And so we know it's at risk. And then we also, in terms of the arrangements being made, there's no protection around it. The arrangements can be changed at a moment's notice. Secondly, though, we obviously saw through the federal campaign, the Liberals don't believe in this. Peter Dutton most certainly didn't. And we know here, and we've seen you talk about bonkers, the comments from Tim Wilson on this. I don't even want to repeat them. You can say them.
Yeah, I didn't know. I was like, I didn't want to give it airtime either.
It's just to use that sort of extreme language.
Yeah. It sullies the impact of what apartheid did have on people in South Africa.
Exactly.
And he's running this one around based on having to work from home.
It was just extraordinary. But again, he should, you know, I don't know if he's walked down any street in his electorate anytime recently. There's a number of families who working from home keeps their life in balance. Yeah. It's also, I was in Port Melbourne last week at a local cafe, and you get this again from cafes across the suburbs. More people working from home, they do the drop-off, they pick up the coffee from the local coffee shop. Yeah. Like it's about, from the arguments that we're hearing from the business world about, this is not good for business, this is good for business. It's supporting small and family businesses right across the suburbs. It also, in terms of being good for business, it means more people can stay in the workforce, can increase their hours. I met another just wonderful family in Mill Park. Dad's a truckie, truckie who's away 12, 14 hours a day. Like he clearly can't work from home. He's doing long hours. They've got 3 young kids. The mum could only get back to work when the youngest was 1 because working from home was an option for her. So she's doing 3 days a week. And that 3 days is obviously a huge increase in their household income. But also for them, there's not that stress. The childcare costs, if someone's sick and both parents are away, it's a huge. So we can't just dismiss the benefits of working from home for families and for workers. You can't just dismiss them as not being central and relevant to this, to the need to protect working from home.
Talking about the reaction from business, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was so surprised by the reaction of some of the business community who want life to go back to how it was pre-COVID. It reminds me of that film Pleasantville when there was that group of characters that just wanted to stay black and white and were getting really upset that the rest of their community was turning colour. It's like as if they're just trying to hang on to the past. Yeah. And I don't know. Is this it was framed by one of the papers that you're picking a fight with business.
No, it's protecting what working people and families need to have protected. We wouldn't have to protect it if it wasn't at risk, and it's at risk. And I think this idea of we've had these debates around maternity leave, around parental leave, all of these gains, all of these. I'm reminded, and this again may sound a little corny, when I was doing my honours thesis, when I was a university student at La Trobe University, Bendigo, give the uni a plug.
Respect.
I did my honours thesis on the family leave test case, the 1995 family leave test case before the then Industrial Relations Commission. And that was at the time, seen as a significant win for families, because it recognised that families, in addition to, the standard sick leave that you had at the time, and for women, the maternity leave, families also needed some leave arrangements to deal with the life of kids. And it's not just kids, it's older. We're seeing this as a real challenge for many families caring for older members of their family. So the family leave test case at the time, and that was bitterly contested. But the outcome was the Commission added some family leave days into the award system. And so I think seeing it in that context, it's about, and again, this decision is also being driven by data and evidence. And the evidence tells us that workers are more productive. They're more productive when they're working from home, and it increases workforce participation. And those two measures are very good and important for our economy.
Funny watching the business community make an argument against productivity, but there you go. We're in a weird world right now post-COVID. Let's talk about housing, public housing, and the renewal of and the upgrade of public housing, in particular in the inner city towers, has gained some attention, particularly from those on our left. I'm just getting interested to get your thoughts on how the government can balance both renewal and upgrades with also protecting tenants' rights, because the Greens and the hard left are obsessed with this.
And again, for them, it's clearly all about the politics, because if you were taking an evidence-based approach, if you're looking at the problem we're trying to address here, we have these ageing housing towers that have served families for a really long time and have been important for many families in terms of supporting them to have a roof over their head. But we know that they do need to be replaced. They're not fit for purpose for a modern world. They don't have the heating and cooling that families need. So they do need to be replaced. And we're doing it in a way, and Minister Shing's working so incredibly hard. We understand we have to treat each family with dignity and to support them through the transition, finding them another home in the local area, because understanding in the local areas, keeping them connected to schools and their local community is really important. And for the Greens to weaponise this, again, it says it all, really. It says it, particularly weaponising it with some of our most vulnerable members of our community. Again, I think we saw during the federal election how the community rejected the Greens political party's weaponising of a range of issues when people want to make sure that, again, how can you argue against giving families the dignity of a modern home that's fit for the decades ahead, not that one that was built decades ago?
Greens, they love their poverty porn. On the other side of the ledger, any more plans to build medium and high density housing in the state seats of Brighton, Malvern, Kew or Caulfield?
The answer is yes, yes, yes and yes. Because again, those are communities that are so well served by public transport, so well served by great schools and access to jobs. And when this is in the context of the policy that we have around our our train and tram activity zones. And again, using evidence and data, it tells us that if you build more homes with a little bit more density around train stations, that's a great outcome. That's exactly the right outcome, particularly for a city where, Melbourne's growing. And one of the reasons why Melbourne continues to grow is because more and more people are choosing Melbourne as a great place to live. They're choosing to live here. They're choosing to stay here. They're choosing to live here as a place to live, as a place to work, as a place to raise a family. And so we want to support that choice. We want to support that into the future, but we've got to make sure that we've got the mix right. We've got to continue to make sure that for people who might want to, welcome to come and live in Bendigo. There's beautiful housing options in Bendigo. They might want a regional choice. They might want to live in the outer suburbs with a bit of land. Or we know there are many Victorians who want to live maybe in the suburb where they were born in, and this is where those suburbs that you talked about. We know, again, from talking to anyone under the age of 40, they're being forced to move further and further away from where they grew up in because they can't afford to get into because there's not enough supply.
Yeah.
And if you also think about the way families operate, families, and it's certainly true for my family. I mentioned my husband Yorick earlier, and the central role he plays in keeping our family in balance, but also the role of other family members, particularly grandparents, it's a big part of how families keep everything in balance. Grandparents want to be close to their grandkids as well. So we've got to give people more choice, and we've got to build more homes. And again, around train stations are a great location. So the answer is yes, we want to build more homes, particularly, Stephen, because we're upgrading many of these train stations. We've removed the level crossings. We've created the space for these homes. You know, the Metro Tunnel is going to absolutely transform our city. The Suburban Rail Loop is going to add to that in the years ahead. So I'm a big fan of building homes near public transport, and we plan to do it.
We'll get to public transport.
Oh, very good, very good.
Speaking of the grandparents, and obviously sometimes they get subcontracted to look after the kids. So I want to ask you about childcare and the need, or what are your thoughts on reforming childcare more broadly in this country? Like there's sort of a conversation at the moment about this concept that childcare is actually an educational thing, not babysitting. And so this idea of, from 3-year-old kinder, that childcare facility is actually attached to a primary school. So the kids are now getting educated as opposed to just looked after. Yep. I just want to get your thoughts broadly on where do we need to go with childcare?
Yeah, I think we are at a real inflection point, I think, in this area. One of my other pieces of work in my university days was I actually did another report on employer-sponsored childcare in the context of needing to provide more childcare choices. And what we've been doing here in Victoria, we have a policy to build kinders on school sites. I mean, there's the benefit for families in terms of the double drop-off, but again, it's seeing kindergarten education as part of that education continuum. The work we're doing in early childhood, and there's some of this comes in the context of those most awful, horrific allegations of abuse that we're seeing around the country. They're just awful. And so it is clear that this is an area that needs more reform. The regulation needs more strengthening to keep children safe. But it does then posit the question around the role of childcare because, yes, there is the important caring element, but the opportunity we know, again, research and data tells us for every 6 months or year that you have a young person, have a little person engaged in an education setting, their lifelong outcomes are improved enormously. And so that's why we have in Victoria, we're rolling out early learning centres, again, where we can, putting them in that school kindergarten setting. I think we are at an interesting inflection point, and the federal government have identified this with their commitment around a universal childcare offering. Which, again, the electorate responded to really strongly and positively because it reflects where families are at right now. So I've long believed there's a really important role in childcare in terms of a young person's education journey, and what we are seeing at the moment in terms of how we have to strengthen the regulation. We'll have more to say very soon here in Victoria about the work that we are going to be doing, and how we need to also see a strengthened national framework in this space as well.
Let's talk about social cohesion in our society. We Victorians obviously pride ourselves on being an accepting and progressive bunch, which I 100% agree with. I think it's true. And often action speaks louder than words. And you reminded me when we were talking a couple of weeks ago that, for example, in 2015, we saw the fine citizens of Bendigo come together to support the Islamic community when outside sort of, I guess I'd call them far-right wing nutjobs protested about the building of a mosque in your hometown. Since October 7, Melbourne's obviously seen this wave of anti-Semitic attacks from both actually the far left and the far right. And for folks outside of Victoria that aren't aware of it, like multiple synagogue arson attacks, vandalism near the Holocaust Museum, violent protests targeting Jewish-owned businesses. Josh Burns, friend of the podcast, who happens to be Jewish, his MP, his office has been targeted twice. It's also leaving many Jewish families fearful right now. And the Jewish community is looking for the government for some leadership. And I'm wondering, how can you and the government be, some light in this dark moment?
Yeah, and it is dark and it is sickening. And those anti-Semitic examples that you've just given. It's distressing for those of us who aren't of the Jewish community and faith, and then to know the history that sits behind this anti-Semitic behaviour. It's just disgraceful. So the answer to your question lies in two parts. One is taking action through changing the law, and what we've done here in Victoria is it went through the Parliament earlier this year, was to introduce new anti-hate powers for Victoria Police. And it's based on that really simple premise that whatever faith you practice, whatever community you're from, also too, however you identify, whoever you love, you have the right to be who you are, to practice your faith free from hate in Victoria. And if you are subjected to hate and hateful behaviour, well, we've changed the law to give police more powers. Those laws come into effect from next month. As a rejoinder, Stephen, those laws were not supported by the Liberal Party here in Victoria, despite the pleadings of the Jewish community, the pleadings of our multicultural and multi-faith communities who worked with us on the development of this legislation because it had a significant period of development. The Liberal Party here in Victoria, for all their running around today and what they say about protests and things, they voted against giving Victoria Police more powers to crack down on hateful behaviour. So in terms of your question, what are we doing? We're taking action on giving police more powers, and we'll be doing more around. And I know this is a cause of conversation, but it's not the protests of the issue here. It's the extremist behaviour. We saw that at the NGV, right? Like turning up to the NGV to protest against the Gandel family was just outrageous. That's not activism. Right? That's not activism. That's anti-Semitism, and it needs to be dealt with. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, and this is something I've been working incredibly hard since that horrendous terrorist invasion of October 7, is understanding that the role I have as Premier and the state government is to support those communities who are grieving. And our Islamic community, our Jewish community, they are grieving. They feel this pain. Many of them have family members who are directly affected. But also to understanding that we need to continue to support communities here, to strengthen social cohesion. The laws is one part of it, but also to further work, further engagement with communities, supporting them. Often, we see many of our multicultural communities, they come together with great pride and celebrations, but for many right now, they want support. It could be support for security arrangements around Hindu temples, for example. So it's about giving really practical support to our communities here, and then looking to the future about what we need to continue to do to strengthen social cohesion here in Victoria.
Because I think one of the strengths of the state is that one of the reasons why I think we are a reasonably harmonious community, and broadly Australians are anyway. I'm not just being very parochial, even though I'm wearing a big V jumper today.
And you're wearing it very well.
Thank you so much. But is that there's this harmony, and the harmony is grounded in the celebration and the joy of our multicultural community. The great foods that we have. The only reason why we have good coffee in this state really is because people from overseas came here and showed us how to make coffee. Yeah. And the celebration of that. Yeah. And I just feel like in the last couple of years that's been, it's not that it's been lost. I just don't feel like there's no more moments there's less moments to celebrate that wonderful thing that's been brought to people by folks who will come from overseas, regardless of what faith they practice, what their ethnic background is.
And we have much to celebrate and enjoy. We have so much. We've got the Indian Film Festival this week happening in Melbourne. So, think of the richness that brings us both in terms of a cultural experience and then a creative industries experience. But I do think one of the challenges, and I say this from, again, talking to people in my own community, like Bendigo's a long way from the Middle East. It's a long way from the Middle East. I think for many people, we're seeing the images. We've seen the images of that horrific terrorist invasion. We've seen the images since then of the conflict. And it's incredibly distressing. And I think for many people, they've found it challenging to know how to say to perhaps a member of our Jewish community, a member of our Islamic community, we support you. What's going on is horrific, because I think it's been crowded out by the noise of some of the extremist behaviour that's sat around this protest activity. So I simply say to all Victorians, there is still space for you to continue to support your local communities, and they appreciate it so deeply, when others are just reach out and provide, it could be a simple word of support. What's going on is terrible. We support you. We stand with you.
Let's talk about something that I know that's very dear to your heart, and something that was a big part of your previous portfolio when you were a minister in the Andrews government, public transport and infrastructure. Victoria's Big Build is a huge part of the portfolio of the previous government and continues to be one. It's a signature project, particularly Melbourne Metro, and you mentioned it before. It's obviously opening later this year. Tell us how significant is the opening of the Melbourne Metro?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge, and I'm incredibly excited by it. But to put it in context, this is the biggest thing to happen to our train network since the City Loop opened more than 40 years ago. So anyone who travels on our train network, anyone who comes in and out of Melbourne, can you imagine Melbourne without Melbourne Central, Flagstaff, Parliament stations? Like they didn't exist before the City Loop was built. And then you think about the way not only have they provided connectivity, but the way they've also created new spaces, the shopping, the business spaces that now sit around those train stations. Well, that's what Metro Tunnel is going to deliver. It's going to absolutely transform the way people travel. And if I can use an example too, in terms of what it means in terms of a real example. Melbourne Uni, huge, sits in that Parkville precinct. You've got Melbourne Uni, the Cancer Centre, the hospitals, Royal Melbourne, Royal Women's, Royal Children's. It's a huge research health hospital university precinct. There's no train line there. There's great tram services, but no train line. So if you're trying to get there to work or to study or be a researcher and you want to choose public transport, it's a bit of a journey. And my nephew, he loves it when I tell this story. My nephew moved down to Melbourne from Bendigo, but he ended up living out near Clayton because all his mates that he moved into a share house with, they were all going to Monash, but he was at Melbourne. So he had to come across the city every day. And he kept saying to me, when are you building the Metro Tunnel? Will you get it done for me? He's now finished uni and is in the workforce. But again, that's an example of how when you can provide connectivity, you open up people's horizons. It means you're opening up opportunities. Yes, there's the time saving that you get from being able to have that direct connection, but it also might mean for some choosing not to go to Melbourne Uni or choosing not to go to RMIT or choosing not to take up that job because they can't get there by public transport. And that's what public transport delivers. It delivers an equality of opportunity, and that's where the Metro Tunnel is really going to not just transform the day-to-day train movements of people, but transform the way people can think about their future work and study opportunities.
Speaking of connectivity, the Suburban Rail Loop, I'm wondering, are you paying attention to the anti-SRL campaign being run out of the Age newspaper headquarters?
Stephen.
And follow-up question, should they have to declare how much they're spending on this campaign to the VEC?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to, Stephen. I know I've noticed the Age reader surveys that say they strongly support. I think we've had at least 2 of those Age reader surveys that say we like the Suburban Rail Loop. The Oz ran one as well, which we should give a special shout out to. We really should.
How much polling is being buried every time they do it and discover that everyone loves it and goes, we're not running that?
And you know why people love it? Because they get it. They get it. And if you are someone right now, and I used the uni example before, Monash University, it's the biggest university in the country. And then when you sit it in the context of everything else that's out there in terms of the Heart Hospital and the synchrotron and all of that activity that's out there, there's no train line there. It's been talked about for decades and decades and decades. Well, we're getting one with the Suburban Rail Loop. So that's why. Going back to, what drives me, it's always driven me, what particularly drives me as Premier is supporting working people and family and their choices and their opportunities. People get it. People get it because they're doing it now. They're stuck in traffic and they understand that one of the ways to address congestion is to build more train services so more people can get to where they go. Saves time, saves money, less stress. People get it. That's why they support the Suburban Rail Loop.
Would you describe yourself as a gunzel?
A little. it's funny what the public transport portfolio does to you. Like it was almost instant. It's almost like a microchip got implanted. I became a gunzel. I guess it's also, Stephen, and I know you grew up in country Victoria as well. I think coming from regional Victoria, but growing up in the country, that experience, you go think about the first time you caught the train.
Oh.
As a teenager, that independence, that thrilling experience of a little bit of money in your pocket. I had my cool denim jacket on because it was the late 80s.
You probably went double denim, I reckon.
Oh, yeah. Who didn't? No,
I'm not Canadian.
That feeling of independence, that feeling of being able to travel into the city, go shopping at Myer in Melbourne. Yeah. We had a Myer in Bendigo, but going to Myer in Melbourne was next level. So, that feeling of independence, but also that understanding of connectivity that comes from being able to simply get on a train, takes you to where you want to go safely, but connects you to a whole new world of opportunity. It's pretty cool.
And that train would have probably in those days been the ones where it had the compartments.
Hey, I'm not that old.
No. We had that Warragul. Did you
okay.
not have that?
I remember catching the train to Echuca as like a 4-year-old in those trains.
Yeah.
Us in Bendigo's a little bit bigger. We might have had some fancier trains.
Yeah, right. No, I still got them in year 11.
No, we had the Sprinters. Now I'm showing my true Now I'm showing my true gunzel. I know. You know the difference between a Sprinter and a Velocity?
No, I don't actually.
No, okay. Maybe some of your listeners can. Yes. But no, it is. It's public transport is so central to supporting the growth of our state.
So the reason why I asked you, are you a gunzel? And no people are Googling right now what a gunzel is.
But if you're a gunzel, you don't need to Google, right? Anyway.
We sent out a message to our Patreon community that subscribed to the podcast. The Premier's coming on. Do you have any questions for the Premier? Okay. They were all public transport questions.
Oh, really?
All of them.
You've got a gunzel audience.
Yeah, I think we do. We have a Venn diagram that's Labor, campaigny, gunzel. Anyway, totally. So here we go. There's a couple here and then we'll let you get on with the rest of your evening. The first one's from Cameron in Canberra, actually. As a non-Victorian...
That city with that light rail service that enviously look at our heavy rail service. But yes.
I've always found it puzzling why a Victorian government never took back ownership of the Melbourne train network except for V-Line after Kennett's hissy fit privatisation process. I find it especially puzzling when in 2004 the Bracks government gave M-Trans contract to Connex after the National Express. Geez, Cameron, you really know what I'm talking about here.
Cameron's a gunzel.
Yeah, after the National Express pulled out and the government temporarily took control. What is the reasoning behind keeping it privatised? Yeah. Also, I love the SRL, he says.
Oh, I love the SRL, and 57% of the readers of The Australian love the SRL too, Stephen and Cameron. Yes, totally. Look, that's a really legitimate question. And can I just be clear in case there's any doubt? Gunzel for me is a term of affection. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's a legitimate question. And, we've seen, and this is really showing a level of detail in the train system, we've seen how, particularly in the UK, some of the franchise arrangements over there that, was looked to by Kennett as a model, have been really fraught. The issue for us right here and now is we're locked into those longer term contracts. We're locked in. And so in terms of the immediate opportunity, it's just not there. But it is legitimate. And having lived through that V-Line experience that Cameron referred to, by bringing V-Line back into government ownership, because it was totally... Back to your year 11 self-catching the trains with the compartments, clearly. It was actually what privatisation of the V-Line network meant was that it was run down. Like they actually had a plan to close a whole bunch of country. In addition to the 5 country lines they did close, there was more of them that were on the hit list. They privatised the Warrnambool line. They privatised the Shepparton line. So it meant a degradation of services that we've had to build back up. I was once stuck at a level crossing in Bairnsdale, of all places, watching the Velocity train go through, and I was reflected, Stephen, that the only reason I was stuck at that level crossing was because the Bracks Labor government reopened the train line to Bairnsdale.
That's true. I remember that.
Yep. So, look, it's a legitimate question. I've got nothing to announce today on your program, Stephen, that might make Cameron happy, but it is what we're focused on is building up the network.
Yep. The second question actually is one from both Jake and Tom separately have asked a similar question. It's basically, when Melbourne Metro opens, how much will there be an increase in services in the other lines other than the Sunbury and Pakenham and Cranbourne lines? So what does the service look like in terms of increasing that area?
So what the Metro Tunnel, as again, your listeners know very well, the Metro Tunnel connects up. It's going to create a 97-kilometre long train line from Sunbury in the north to Cranbourne and Pakenham, because there's two branch lines in the southeast. 97 kilometres. So if you want to, if you live in Sunbury, you've got family in Pakenham, you can jump on the train and go door to door. What it does, though, is it takes those very busy train lines out of the existing city loop. So it gives us space in the city loop for in the future to add more train services. But we're not waiting until the opening of the Metro Tunnel. This year's budget has actually funded on a whole bunch of train lines additional services, because we know Metro Tunnel opening later this year, the space will be created, so we're already doing put the funding down now. It takes a little while to do timetable adjustments. I won't go down that rabbit hole with you today, Stephen. I can see that fearful look in your eyes. You're going to talk about timetables, and to get those extra services on the network once the Metro Tunnel's opened.
Right. Last question, and there's a contextual component to the question. In European football, there's this concept of a sell-on clause. So if, for example, my football team, Celtic, sell a player to a new team for, say, £20 million, Celtic get that transfer fee. Okay. But if that player then gets sold to a third club with even more money, say it's $100 million, Celtic get 20% of that transfer fee as well. So it's like a finder's fee. Okay? Does the Victorian government get a finder's fee for all of the policies developed here in Victoria that Peter Malinauskas copied and implemented in South Australia, and then on-sold it to Chris Minns's Labor government in New South Wales? And how much is that finder's fee worth to the Victorian state budget?
Don't forget Western Australia.
Oh, they pinched some of our ideas as well.
Yeah. Come on, don't forget Western Australia. They pinched a couple of things as well, our rolling stock plan. I know that because I helped give that to them in terms of the policy work. Yeah, there's a little bit. You should also add in the federal government, free TAFE.
What, which they wanted to call free TAFE?
It's free TAFE. Urgent care centres, just to name a couple. Yeah, and I guess going back to some of those earlier reflections, Stephen, that some interstaters made about us here in Victoria, we've got a lot. We've got a lot to come here in Victoria. We've announced protecting working from home this week, which is where the future of work is going and where the future of supporting families is going. We're doing some more work here in Victoria to continue to be where families are, where working people are, not just today, but understanding what we need to do as a government. That responsibility is of a government. Deliver good frontline services today, but make sure you're putting the work in to support families into the future.
Premier, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Stephen.
Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. Shout out to Michael Brown and Oliver for joining our socially democratic Patreon community. We're looking forward to hearing your questions and joining us in the conversation the next time around. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.